This video is how to perform a capability analysis in Quantum Excel. Capability analysis is also called a CPK or PPK analysis. As a setup, I have the voltage for 30 different parts recorded in column A in Excel. Since the only thing in column A is the voltage, I can just click on the column A and then click on Analysis Tools, Capability Analysis. Quantum Excel then asked me the data range. It truncated the data range to cells A1 through A31 since there was no data below cell A31. If I had forgotten to select the data range, I could select it now. Now I click on Next. When I click on Next, Quantum Excel will ask me the specification limits. The upper spec limit is going to be 103, and the lower spec limit is going to be 97. It is important to note that the spec limits are not from the data. They are not calculated values from the data. The spec limits, in theory, should come from the customer or from your boss or from the drawing or from some other source, but you cannot calculate the spec limits. The target is typically the value directly between the spec limits. Since the lower spec limit is 97, the upper spec limit is 103, I'll type in 100. The target is completely optional. I could optionally change the subgroup size, but now I'll just leave it as individuals. And then I can choose to calculate CPK and PPK, CPK only, or PPK only. Quantum Excel is compliant with the Automotive Industry Action Group, which is called AIAG, in their definitions of how you calculate CPK and PPK. It is important to note that some industries, in particular Boeing's D19000, pretty much uses the exact opposite of what AIAG uses. So you need to be careful about which industry you're in. I could also click on Transforming Goodness of Fit. By default, Quantum Excel uses the Anderson-Darling test for normality. You can optionally change it to the Shapiro-Wilk or the Kolmogorov-Smirnov. If your data is not normal, you can try to do a transformation using either the Johnson transformation or the Box-Cox transformation. And then in the advanced options, you can choose to enter the population, mean, or standard deviations if you know them. And you can also change the way that the standard deviation is calculated within subgroups. Finally, you can optionally choose to calculate the confidence intervals for the CP and the CPK. When you're done, click Finish, and Quantum Excel will calculate the results of the CPK analysis. In the upper left-hand corner are all the information that you entered when you started the CPK analysis, such as the spec limits. And in the center, you will find the bell curve. There are vertical lines for the spec limits as well as the target, and there are two bell curves. The short-term standard deviation is depicted in blue, and that goes with CPK. And the long-term standard deviation is a black dotted line, and that goes with PPK. CPK is often called within, and PPK is often called within and between. The difference between CPK and PPK are the way that the standard deviation is calculated. If I zoom into the statistics, you can see that the two standard deviations are listed here. The standard deviation overall, it goes with PPK, and the standard deviation within goes with CPK. The CPK value is calculated. It is currently 0.94. The PPK value is calculated as well at 1.01. Above the CPK is the CP, and above the PPK is the PP. The observed defects tells you in your data set how many observed values are outside of the spec range scaled to 1,000,000. Because we had no values in the data set outside of the range of 97 to 103, there are 0 parts per million. The short-term defects, which again goes with CPK, there are 1,780 less than the lower spec limit. There are 2,199 greater than the upper spec limit. And if we add 1,780 and 2,199, we get 3,980 total defects per million. The overall or long-term defects goes with PPK, and there are 958 below the lower spec limit, 1,214 above the upper spec limit, and the total is 2,172. The goodness of fit test that we mentioned earlier was the Anderson-Darling test. Its value was 0.66, but more importantly is its p-value. Its p-value is 0.07. If the p-value becomes less than 0.05, most people would reject normality and choose to do a transformation or fit a different distribution. It is important to note that there is a difference between CPK and PPK. That difference is not easy, and it is beyond the context of this video. But if you go to AIAG's website, you can find information from their capability analysis workbook. And that is how you perform a capability analysis in Quantum Excel.